ते सांगत आहोत. बघ इथे ठेवलंय.
Let us start. I hope you are in good health, all of you. This is the second session where what I plan today is to talk about what are the contents of the second course in the set of courses that we are offering under AWS Academy. Before we start, just let me take an opportunity to ask whether my voice is properly audible. There are no aberrations as there were earlier last week. Anybody can comment through chat window also, or can also comment through unmuting them. My voice is audible? Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. So let us begin. So today's discussion, what I plan to start off with is to talk about this particular course called as AWS Academy Generative AI Foundation. I'm going to talk about what all modules are there and what modules you are supposed to learn through this particular course and master through this particular course. As the name suggests, the course is focused on specifically the generative AI concepts. So a niche part of AI domain that is today very popular called as generative AI. The whole course is concentrated on that. Okay, so let's start the discussion. So this particular course starts off with making you aware about what exactly the generative AI means, and mostly in the module 1 there is just a student guide and nothing more than that. So we also looked at last week what do you mean by a student guide. Generally it is set of resources for student, reading resources basically, which will give you enough insight into what to be expected from this particular course. We also have certain overview content and a pre-course survey. So every AWS course, academic course, has a pre-course survey and an exit survey. Both of them will help AWS in understanding how why you came to this course and how you actually feel after completing the course, so that they can make the changes appropriately in their contents. Okay, so let's that someone is trying to get in. Let me take them in. So this particular course, this starts with second module. This is the study module. This gives you an introduction about what is machine learning, what is the difference between machine learning, deep learning, and generative AI. Now, for those of you who have actually opted for this course, most of you already know what is machine learning. But if you are someone very new to these concepts, very briefly and tersely, I'll try to define what do you mean by machine learning. So machine learning is a set of techniques. You can consider that to be a algorithmic framework that actually tries to improve an agent's performance. Agents, in a sense, a software solution, its performance on a specific task. And what we try to do is we try to improve the performance of that agent or that particular algorithm doing that particular task. And that task generally is kind of either differentiated into a classification, a clustering, or some sort of a predictive task. So tasks in ML generally are descriptive or predictive in nature, and these descriptive or predictive tasks, using machine learning infrastructure, we try to improve our performance on this task as we try to perform these tasks again and again. So we want to make the performance of the agent updated with respect to a performance measure using some sort of algorithm techniques. That is what machine learning is. That's how I can actually tell you what machine learning is without actually going deeply into the theory of machine learning. Now when it comes to deep learning, it is kind of a specific branch of machine learning. So deep learning is also a type of machine learning But the difference that we have in deep learning is generally in machine learning we consider the things happen in just a single kind of one step mechanism you can consider. But in deep learning you actually have different kind of stages of learning certain different kinds of aspects of making your performance better on the problem. Okay, so we do exactly a similar kind of setup that we had in machine learning. There was a task in machine learning, there was an agent who was trying to perform the task, and we wanted that performance to be enhanced, and for doing that we laid down certain staged activities that machine learning would be used in order to the performance get better on the task. In deep learning we can consider that we have multi-stage approach where each stage focuses on a different aspect of improvement, and overall improvement can be achieved. That is what deep learning is. So deep learning majorly concentrates on multi-stage approach you can consider to machine learning. Specifically talking about in today's date, that is after 2019 onwards, whenever the deep learning concept comes into picture or comes foray, we talk about majorly one major architecture which is called as neural network architecture. Now this neural network architecture is basically a architecture of a solution to any sort of machine learning problem, be it classification, be it regression, be it some kind of predictive or descriptive nature, in which we use a architectural framework that is inspired from biological neurons that we have in our brain. So in human beings or in animals, you can say, you have something called as neurons which help us taking certain kinds of decisions. They are a key part of our intelligence, that is what we feel, and we try to mimic the models of these neurons using an architecture called as neural networks. So at this moment this is sufficient to know that is there is a biologically inspired algorithm technique called as neural network. When I use neural network for doing machine learning, I try to use multiple layers of neurons together. That particular thing is referred to as deep learning. Now I've talked a lot about what deep learning is. I'll just simplify it. So what I'm using in machine learning, I'm using biologically inspired algorithmic technique, okay, that is neural network. The architecture of the solution that improves the performance on task is now dedicated to be very much similar to how human neurons work, or I could say animal or any neuron work. So we get inspired from how neurons work. We lay down an architecture of a solution that does machine learning, okay, and we do not use it in a one staged manner, but we have multiple layers of these neurons connected together, and that's why they are called as neural networks. So we have neuron as an architecture that gets inspired from the human neurons, or you can say neurons in your nervous system, okay. These neurons, when they do certain tasks, they actually don't do it in alone manner. They do it as a network of set of neurons which are large in numbers. Those who are from AIDS, for them this is bread and butter, but others I'm trying to explain you what we are looking for when we are looking for deep learning. So essentially we are doing machine learning. For that we are using neural networks, and the neural networks that we are using have multiple layers of operations. That is, one operation happens, the signals are passed to the second level, then the second set of neurons work on that, then third set of neurons work on that. They are dedicated to work on specific stage of operation, and that's why we call it as deep learning. So now we are going into the foray where we are talking about certain kind of models which are called as language models, which try to capture the input and represent it in terms of certain patterns which are of smaller size concise way we try to represent or remember what we have seen in the input. So we